So students, let's now jump into chapter 28, where we shift our focus from individual learning to collective learning. Collective learning is a vital capability for any organization operating in complex and turbulent environments. So learning objectives, first we aim to understand the nature of collective learning, how learning happens not just individually, but across groups and organizations. We will explore how collective learning helps organizations adapt, innovate, and survive over time. We'll discuss the important role of organization rules and shared mental models. We'll examine how collective learning can challenge and reshape mental models, leading to a transformational change. We will identify common impediments to collective learning, such as rigid structures, fear of failure, and knowledge hoarding, which is also a very critical problem in many organizations. And finally, we'll explore strategies to minimize or eliminate these impediments, building a healthier or a more adaptive organization. By the end of this chapter, you should see how collective learning is not just a nice to have, it's a core organizational survival skills. So our first key point is that effective organizations know how to mobilize collective reflection and learning. It's not just about each individual improving, it's about creating a system where teams and departments learn together and adjust the course when needed. It's not about a mindset of a hero or a zero. So neither we need a hero nor we need a zero. We need all as heroes. Everybody presents their own unique talent and skills, whereby we can pioneer in collective learning. It's vital for any organizational effectiveness. So when we look at the fast changing environment today, organizations that learn together can adapt faster, solve complex problems more effectively, and innovate more consistently than those that operate in silos. Finally, we will emphasize the critical role of leadership in facilitating the collective learning. Leaders need to create a psychologically safe space for dialogue, encourage the sharing of experiences, and a model reflective practices themselves. So without this leadership, the drive to collective learning will fall flat. So let's take a look at shared mental models that collective beliefs, assumptions, and understanding guide people how people behave. First, rules drive behavior, and behavior leads to results. So these rules can be formal, like policies and procedures, or informal, like unspoken norms. Beneath these rules are the beliefs and assumptions people hold about what is right, what is efficient, or what is expected. If those beliefs are outdated or misaligned, the rules and behaviors they produce can also be ineffective. Finally, a shared understanding shapes action. When team members align their mental models, for example, agreeing on what excellent customer service looks like, their actions become more coordinated and consistent, leading to a stronger outcome. Without alignment at the belief and assumption level, and simply changing surface behaviors often fails to deliver lasting results. Let's take an example. A hospital is implementing a new hand hygiene protocol in order to reduce infections. The formal rule is sanitize hands before and after every patient interaction. But compliance is often inconsistent. Why? Because the underlying mental models vary. Some staff may believe that quick tasks don't require sanitizing, Others might think, I have never caused an infection, so it's not critical for me. Without addressing these underlying beliefs, simply reinforcing the rule won't work effectively. However, if leadership engages staff in collective learning, shares real infection case studies, and discusses the true risk and impact, it reshapes the shared mental model. Hand hygiene protects every patient, no matter how small the task is. As this shared understanding deepens, behavior changes naturally, not just because of a rule, but because of a genuine shift in belief. Let's take another healthcare example, the discharge process, which we discussed in the last chapter. So, in many hospitals, the formal rule is that patients should receive clear written discharge instructions before leaving. However, reality often deviates. Rushed discharges, incomplete instructions, and assumptions that, yep, patient would figure it out. The underlying mental model might be patients don't really read the paperwork, or our job ends once the patient walks out the door. If these unspoken beliefs are not surfaced and challenged, the discharge process will always remain flawed. So, by facilitating a collective reflection, maybe sharing data on readmission, understanding the causes, understanding the confusion that the patients goes when they reach home, having that patient feedback, success stories where proper education helped, staff can rebuild a shared mental model. It'll be a complete patient-centered discharge, which is critical to fully recover and prevent avoidable readmissions. This shift leads not just to compliance with the rule, but to the genuine ownership of the discharge experience. So once collective learning starts and it takes hold, organizations gains the ability not to just reflect, but modify the very rules that guides their behavior. This process happens in two stages. First, the team engage in diagnosing, understanding, and adjusting the rules. They identify which rules are outdated, which rules are misaligned, or even counterproductive given the organization's current challenges. For example, a healthcare team might recognize that a strict rule about in-person consultation delays patient access would unnecessarily lead to revising protocols to including virtual visits. Second, organizations work on aligning themselves with external environment. In a fast-changing world like us, healthcare, technology, education, this adaptability becomes critical. So it's not just about the internal improvements. It's about staying relevant and responsive to patient needs, market demands, or technological advances. In short, collective learning enables rule modification, and rule modification enables organizational success and organizational survival. So, tech company Netflix, they realized early that the rigid approval process were slowing down innovation. Through collective learning, they replaced the traditional rules with a freedom and responsibility model, trusting employees to make decisions aligned with company goals, dramatically boosting creativity and speed. As we continue exploring learning within the organization, it's important to distinguish between single loop and double loop learning, which we discussed in the last chapter. Here, In the collective learning, single loop learning focuses on refining the existing process, whereas double loop goes deeper. It challenges the assumption, it gives you the opportunity to revisit the policies or values that drive the behavior in the first place. Using the thermostat example we mentioned earlier, instead of simply adjusting the temperature, you question why the thermostat is set the way it is, whether a different system would make it better, or if the goal, meaning comfort versus energy efficiency, needs rethinking. So in organizations, double loop learning could mean questioning whether the business model, the leadership style, or the performance metrics themselves need to change. So both loops are valuable and is essential for innovation and adaptability. So when do organizations realize they need to engage in double loop learning? It often takes a significant disruption, a crisis, or an unmet goal, or a glaring inconsistency between what they expect and what is actually happening. For instance, think about a hospital that has historically had excellent surgical outcomes. Suddenly, complication rates start rising despite all protocols being followed. The leadership can initially think it's just a process issue, maybe a need for more staff training. But as they dig deeper, they realize that changes in the patient population, it can be older, it can be complex cases, mean their assumption about the risk management need to evolve. It's not just about tweaking the older system. It is redefining how surgeries are prepped, how it is staffed, how they are managed. So these moments of incongruence, when what we thought would happen doesn't match the reality, that becomes the critical triggers that push the leaders and organizations to reflect more deeply about challenging their assumptions and creating more meaningful and lasting changes. So when organizations recognize the need for change, a critical next step is revisiting their shared mental models. Shared mental models are the collective assumptions, beliefs, and framework that the teams rely on to make sense of their environment and coordinated actions. If these models become rigid or outdated, what we call as ingrained schemata, they can blind the organization to new threats and opportunities. So in order to stay competitive and effective, leaders must ensure that these models remain fluid and adaptable. So to truly embed collective learning into an organization, leaders must create intentional spaces for reflection. Organizations often operate in a consistent doing mode, launching projects, solving problems, and move fast. While action is necessary, without stepping back to reflect collectively, teams always risk repeating the same mistakes, overlooking innovations, and entrenching on inefficient patterns. Reflection spaces like after action reviews, structured debriefs, or even informal learning lunches allows team to pause, analyze what worked, what didn't, and why. For instance, many hospitals conduct post-incident debriefs after critical events to ensure not only the clinical improvements, but also learning the emotional resilience. So by building these reflecting opportunities, organizations don't just respond reactively, they grow strategically. So one of the most effective tools for facilitating the collective learning is the after action review. We touch base highly in the early chapters. The AAR, it is designed to help teams reflect on a recent activity. It can be a project, it can be a critical incident, or even it can be a routine process. It revolves around four simple but powerful questions. What was supposed to happen? What actually happened? Why were there differences? What can we learn and change for the next time? So, a few tips to make AAR successful. Timing, conduct them soon after the event while memories are fresh. Participation, ensure everyone has a voice. Tone, maintain a structure but keep the discussion informal and focused only on learning, not blaming. So, in healthcare, many hospitals perform a brief AAR after a code blue event. I'm assuming everyone is familiar with a code blue. It's a typical call that is made where multiple professionals who are in different disciplines come together to save a patient. So that incident, the after action review, is not to assign fault, but to uncover learning opportunities. Were communication channels clear? Were protocols followed? Or do they need revision? And how can we improve next time? So by making AARs as a habit, organizations normalize continuous improvement rather than waiting for a formal reviews or a crisis moment. So even with the best intentions, organizations often face major impediments to learning collectively. Let's walk through a few common barriers. Poor systemic appreciation. Teams often fail to see how different parts of the organizations are interconnected. Without understanding the big picture or the system as a whole, a local change can cause unintended consequences elsewhere. Number two, lack of dialogue channels. If there are no safe spaces or processes for open dialogue, reflection and learning stall. Employees may see problems but have no platform to discuss them. Contextual challenges. Sometimes external pressures like regulatory changes, market shifts, or leadership turnovers can make it difficult to prioritize learning even when it is desperately needed. Ingrained mental models. People tend to hold on to existing beliefs, even when those beliefs no longer fit in the evolving reality. These rigidity make adaptations difficult. Dysfunctional interactions, so poor collaboration, lack of trust, or political infighting can block the honest communication needed for true collective learning. In a hospital setting, imagine if nurses notice recurring delays in medication delivery but feels afraid to speak up, or if pharmacy and nursing team blames each other instead of collaborating to solve the issue. So without a systemic appreciation or appreciation of other systems or other departments or other divisions and carrying out open dialogue and also building that mutual trust, the real root causes go unaddressed and definitely patient care suffers. So recognizing these impediments is the first step towards designing an environment where learning can truly thrive. So one very practical tool of improving the organizational learning is the priority review process. What is priority review process? It is a very structured feedback exercise where the organization steps back and examines Are we truly working on what matters most? Or have we been swept up by activities that seems urgent but aren't actually important? Some of the key elements here is organizational feedback process. Leaders invite input from across teams, not just top down, to understand what employees believe are the highest value priorities. Identifying real versus perceived priorities. Sometimes what people think as a priority is based on outdated assumptions or past habits. Priority reviews surface these gaps by comparing current initiatives with strategic goals. So let's look at a real world example where organizational feedback directly improved operations, specifically from the National Health Services or NHS in the UK, United Kingdom. The textbook gives the detailed example. In a regional NHS trust, the administrators noticed a growing delays in patients getting their bone density scans. These are called DEXA scans. Initially, the assumption was that the bottleneck was caused by outdated equipment or staffing shortages, which is very common assumption whenever you talk to a diagnostic imaging department or even hospital operations. However, when this hospital conducted a priority review and after action review, two powerful tools, they uncovered a surprising insight. Many patients were referred for bone scans without establishing a clear clinical necessity. And in other cases, referring physicians were unclear on updated screening guidelines. So once the hospital understood this, the hospital updated their referral protocols, provided clear clinical criteria to primary care doctors. They trained staff to triage and prioritize truly the high-risk patients. As a result, the wait times dropped significantly without adding new machines or staff. More importantly, the patient outcomes improved because the right individuals got faster access to critical diagnosis. Key lesson here is by listening carefully and tailoring the action to real needs, the NHS team solved a serious operational problem, not through bigger budgets, but through better collective learning. Now let's explore Google. Google has long been recognized not just as a tech innovator, but as a learning organization. They use reflection and rapid feedback loops to drive improvement. So their key practice is early product launch. Instead of waiting for a perfect product, Google often launches early versions to selected users. This allows them to get real-world feedback to shape the product development dynamically. For instance, Gmail and Google Docs both started with a beta launch in order to collect the rapid learning. They also promoted the transparency and external collaboration through this open source approach. So technologies, the cloud technologies, Kubernetes, TensorFlow, the machine language and AI frameworks, they were all made as open source, enable Google to both learn from the global tech community and accelerate its own innovation cycle. They embrace failure with creativity. Google's famous moonshot thinking encourages teams to aim high and treat failures as learning experiences rather than setbacks. Projects like Google Glass, though not commercially successful initially, it provided deeper insights that influenced later innovations like augmented reality applications. So Google's organizational structure and culture are designed to encourage rapid learning, reflective practice, and iterative improvement. All are true hallmarks for a learning organization. So let's take a look into an important research study that challenges some common assumptions about organizational transparency. Ethan Bernstein conducted a landmark study examining how transparency impacts learning and innovation within organizations. So traditionally, it was believed that more transparency, making process, decision, and activities visible to everyone, would naturally lead to better collective learning. Their findings: privacy fosters innovation. Bernstein discovered that when employees were constantly visible and observed, they become more cautious and risk averse. In contrast, the periods of privacy allowed teams to experiment, innovate, and correct mistakes without the fear of judgment. Visibility paradox. The study introduced the idea of visibility paradox. While some transparency is essential for accountability, too much visibility stifles creativity and learning. Employees need their own zones of privacy to explore new ideas, test hypotheses, and learn through trial and error. Organization must balance transparency with protected learning spaces to encourage experimentation, innovation, and adaptive learning. Full visibility might look good on paper, but can unintentionally suppress the very behaviors needed for growth. As Bernstein's study reminds us, fostering innovation and learning is not just making everything visible. It's about creating the right condition for reflection, dialogue, and adaptation. So let's summarize the key takeaways from this chapter on collective learning. Chapter 28 emphasizes that organizations thrive when they learn collectively. It explores how leaders must foster reflection both during action and after action. Some of the key ideas include the mental models, single loop versus the double loop learning, the triggers for learning, happening with crisis, unmet goals, incongruence, often spark the need for reflection and change, collective learning, some of the barriers or obstacles in collective learning, tools for reflection, the after action review, AAR, and the priority review. We also looked at the case study where NHS improved the bone density scan by listening to feedback. We looked at Google as a company, as an organization, as a culture, which exemplified learning through rapid product launches, open source practice, and embracing failure. So collective reflection is critical for learning, adaptation, and innovation. Leaders must encourage environments where learning, dialogue, and flexible thinking are part of everyday operation. Now let's take a look at chapter 29, bringing everything together. Chapter 29 focuses on everything that we learned about change management, the theories, the models, the diagnostics, the planning, the action, the adaptation, and reflection. It emphasized that effective change leadership requires a dynamic and iterative approach and not just following a fixed plan. Some of the key themes: application of change theories and tools. Leaders must apply models thoughtfully based on situation and not on rigidity. Diagnose before action. Accurately diagnose the organization's needs is essential before choosing and implementing a solution. Design and implementation, designing a change plan aligned with organizational needs and culture, managing the human side of the change to build commitment, adaptations during change, being flexible when plans hit obstacles, using feedback loops to adjust the strategies in real time, reflecting and continuous learning. Post-change reflection is critical for capturing lessons learned. It helps organizations build adaptive capacity for future changes. So change leadership is a cycle of diagnosis, action, adaptation, and reflection. Success comes not from the rigid adherence to one model, but from the agile integration of framework, people-centered leadership, and continuous learning. So before any change can succeed, leaders must accurately diagnose what is happening to the organization. There are so many change drivers that can happen. The change drivers can be coming from external market pressures, or it can be coming from the internal operational silos or internal challenges. So when planning any organizational change, the first step is to identify the drivers which are pushing for that change, whether it is external or internal. Effective leaders recognize the importance of diagnosing both external and internal drivers early. By doing so, they ensure that the change initiatives they design are not just reactive, but strategic, aligning both with external market demands and the internal strategic needs. So once the need for change is clear, the next step is to develop a robust change plan. A key principle here is to engage stakeholders early. So involving key individuals and groups from the start helps to build that buy-in process. It uncovers the potential barriers. It creates a sense of shared ownership over the change effort. The earlier you engage the people, the smoother the implementation tends to be. At the same time, it's essential to align the organization's mission, structure, systems, and incentives. And without alignment, even the best intentioned change efforts can falter. The mission must guide the change, the organizational structure must support it, the systems must enable it, and the incentives must reinforce the new behavior and outcomes that you are seeking. In short, a successful change plan isn't just a roadmap. It is a system-wide realignment that creates the condition for lasting transformation. So when implementing change, it's critical to use structured models that help guide the process. One foundational model which we looked at is the Levin's force field analysis, which frames change as a balance between the driving forces and the restraining forces. So according to Levin, organization must first unfreeze, meaning they must disrupt the status quo to create the readiness for the change. Next, they proceed through the change phase, where they build new behaviors, new process, or mindset, and then they refreeze, stabilizing those practices so they become a new normal. We also looked at Kotter's 8-step change model, which provides a detailed roadmap for leading change successfully. Kotter emphasized steps like creating a sense of urgency, building a guiding coalition team, developing and communicating a clear vision, empowering a broad-based action, generating short-term wins, and anchoring the new approaches in the organizational culture. And together, these models provide a powerful toolkit for both diagnosis and also methodically steering the organization through each phase of transformation. Even with the best laid plans, change initiatives often run into significant barriers. One of the first challenges that you need to overcome is the political resistance. Individuals or groups may oppose the change due to fear of losing power, losing resources, or status. So, navigating organizational politics becomes crucial here. The second challenge is the cultural inertia. Organizations naturally resist change because the existing values, habits, and traditions are deeply embedded. And without deliberate efforts to shift mindset, old ways of thinking and operating can persist. Lastly, the resource constraints. Whether it is limited funding, staffing, or time, often slow down or derail change efforts. Leaders must prioritize carefully, allocate resources strategically, and maintain momentum despite these constraints. So, recognizing and preparing for these common challenges is essential to successfully managing any organizational change. So, to successfully navigate challenges during the change, leaders must adopt adaptive strategies. So, flexible adjustments are critical. Strengthening the communication ensures that everyone stays aligned. Open, honest, and frequent communication build trust, clarifies intentions, and reduce the resistance among employees. And building a quick win is an essential strategy to maintain momentum. So achieve small early success creates positive energies, proves that change is possible, and helps build broader support for the transformation journey. In short, adaptability, communication, and quick wins turn obstacles into opportunities for growth. So, through the change process, we achieved several important outcomes. We secure short-term success. Organizations began experiencing long-term cultural shifts. We improve the alignment and collaboration between the teams and departments. And as a result, silos were reduced, communication becomes more effective, and there was a stronger sense of shared purpose across the organization. These outcomes lay a strong foundation for sustaining and scaling future changes. Reflection on the change effort reveals several key lessons. We recognized the importance of flexibility. We learned that successful change requires a continual diagnosis and learning. And we also understood that leading change is an iterative, it's not a linear process. Progress is rarely straightforward. There will be setbacks, there will be adjustments, there will be discovery of new opportunities. They're a natural part of this journey. So, embracing this mindset allows the organization to stay resilient and adaptive through the change process. So, as we bring everything together, it's important to highlight three key lessons from our exploration of organizational change. The first, theory and practice must be integrated. While there are models, framework, and tools, they only come to life when applied thoughtfully to real-world challenges. It's in the dynamic and sometimes unpredictable realities of organizations where we refine our understandings. Theory guides us, but it is practice, real decisions, real interactions, real outcomes that test the strength of our approach. Great change leaders are not just scholars of the change theory. They are skilled practitioners who knows how to adapt these principles to their context. Second, expect resistance. Resistance is a natural and inevitable part of any change process. It is definitely not a sign of failure. In fact, it often indicates that the change is real and meaningful. Resistance stems from uncertainty, fear of loss, or attachment to the current state. Leaders should anticipate, must anticipate, they should respect it, they should develop strategies to engage with it constructively through communication, involvement, and trust building. Finally, reflect, adapt, and learn continuously. Change is not a straight line, it is iterative, it is ongoing, it is messy, and leading change effectively requires the humility and groundedness to reflect on what is working and what is not, the agility to make adjustments midstream, and the mindset to view setbacks as learning opportunities rather than failures. Continuous learning is what keeps change efforts alive and relevant. So when we integrate theory and practice, prepare for and embrace resistance, and commit to ongoing reflection and adaptation, we lay the foundation for sustainable, meaningful transformation in any organization. So thank you everybody for watching this module 8. This completes the last chapter of this textbook. There is powerful discussion, videos, and assignment. You all should watch the video. It's an amazing video. Even though I have read the book, I was watching the video for the first time too. It's the book Made to Stick. The brothers Chip and Dan Heath, they brought out why some ideas survive and others die, and how you can make your ideas stick in the mind of others. They discuss all of this as 6 key principles that makes memorable, impactful, forming the acronym SUCCESS. Starts with S, find the core of the idea, strip it down to the most essential meaning, keep it very simple. Unexpectedness, grab people's attention by breaking patterns, surprise them, maintain the curiosity by opening the knowledge gaps. They discuss then concreteness, using vivid sensory details, help people understand and remember by grounding your message in something tangible. So instead of saying like high performance, say our fighter jets can deliver bombs within 30-foot circle. Some example. Credibility. Make people believe your idea. Use external validation, statistics, authorities, or internal proof. The kidney transplant survivor who shows their scar is more persuasive than citing the survival rates. Emotions. Make people care. Tap into feelings, not just by making people feel sad or scared, but making them connected to their identity or values. The book shares an example of a charity race from a study that has been done. And it's very important people see connected to those stories, meaningful stories, rather than a wider opportunity that leads to stories. Stories becomes the mental flight simulators. Stories inspire actions. It teach lessons. It make information easier to remember. So good stories follow templates like challenge plots or creativity plots. The final takeaway, if you want your ideas to be remembered, make them simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, and tell them a story. That's the SUCCESS. SUCCES. Sticky ideas sticky ideas aren't just born. They're crafted deliberately by applying these principles. We have 2 very interesting discussion questions. Thinking and reflecting a change in your organization, and identifying at least 3 things that could help ensure that the change will not be contained and will be adopted by other users elsewhere in the organization. capability of the spreadability. Then we have exercise 28.1, reflecting on the quality of collective learning in your organization. You can use and explain all of the concepts that we learn throughout this entire textbook. And as always, Thursday, upload the discussion questions, and then by Sunday, you would be completing the assignment and the peer reviews. So thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to help you navigate through this profound textbook, The Theory and Practice of Change Management. I'm looking forward to reading your discussion questions and the assignments. I'm very grateful and thank you for these assignments and discussion questions that you have posted. It has truly expanded my learning capabilities, my awareness, breaking down the assumptions coming from different backgrounds. There were discussion questions coming from different industries, family businesses, startup companies, traditional problems that are plaguing our world. So it was eye-opening reading from all of the different angles. There is a class survey that has been posted. It's an anonymous survey. I strongly suggest everybody to go ahead and take the survey. And that gives me the opportunity to understand what is working and what is not working. So it will truly take me into the paradigm of how I can improve my video lecture so that it is more and more effective for the future students. So thank you, class. See you in the class. Looking forward for the active discussions and debates and arguments, and finally setting the learnings in a meaningful way. And enjoy, and best wishes for the remainder of your career journey, the school journey, and looking forward to seeing many of you in the future classes. Thank you. Have a great learning.